What's up, YouTube? Static in the Attic, welcome back. I want to start this video by saying mud flood is a theory. But the more I dig into this subject and look at our history, it is a fact that all of our history comes from the last 200 years. We have a gap of 1,000 years in our history. So either it's being covered up and erased from our memory, or it simply didn't happen. But the fact is we have evidence all around the world of a worldwide civilization that had contact with each other. That evidence is being actively covered up and denied by mainstream academia. And all I can say is Egypt is a great place to start with this, because here they just didn't do a very good job of covering their tracks with the cover-up. Egypt, man, if you're a truther and you've been curious about things and looking into things, then you've got an idea of Egypt, definitely. Because, I mean, just think of all of the information there is out there on the subject of Egypt, who built the pyramids, who, all this. But let me ask you this. What was the fall of Egypt? Can anybody answer that? Just like the fall of Rome, where everything just disappeared from history books. We have absolutely no explanation. And then you look at the old photographs and everything looks like this. It looks like a bomb has gone off here. And then the old etchings where it looks like, they're digging out a canyon here. And pay attention to the bull here, because this is going to be important coming up later. Massive statue of an Egyptian pharaoh discovered in slum in Cairo. Archaeologists from Egypt and Germany have discovered the remains of an Egyptian statue. The 26-foot statue made of quartzite was found in groundwater in a working-class neighborhood in Cairo. So it sounds like this was just found in a well. A 26-foot statue of quartzite that nobody knew about and was down in the groundwater. And then we've got mummies that look like this. I mean, the guy looks almost Italian, But the question I'm going to ask here on this subject is that guy 2,000 years old? Has he really been mummified and so well preserved that is a 2,000-year-old mummy? I mean, you can see the shine of the light off of his forehead. There's still a gleam to that skin. And once again, it's just, I'm sure everybody's heard of a million upas, the out-of-place artifacts that are found all around the world, saying that we had cultures that knew one another. And, a few years back, I remember hearing about the Egyptian mummies that were found with cocaine and nicotine in their system. Hey, the Egyptians like to party too. But there's only one place that cocaine comes from: the coca plants in South America. And nicotine, if I'm not mistaken, is all an American plant too, or so we're told. And then when you look at the old 19th century pictures of Rome, this is Rome, Italy, with a pyramid right there in the middle of it. Egyptian obelisk with hieroglyphics all over it. I think that's the same obelisk. And here's another one. And just, plain as day. So was the obelisk just sitting there and everybody was wondering where it came from for 1,000 years? Is that the way that went down? So we've got the story of the Coptics, okay? And I'm going to save you a whole bunch of Wikipedia bull here, and I'm just going to go straight down to the bibliography. And the most prominent of these Coptic historians are, instead of clicking on each one, I'm just going to tell you about them. We've got John of Nikiu. He was a bishop in 696. And then we've got Severus ibn al-Muqaffa. He was a bishop in 987. Then other of the most prominent Coptic historians are Friar Manessa Johanna, 1899 to 1930. Next guy down, Iris Habib al-Mesri. I know I'm butchering these names. 1910 to 1994. Labib Habichi, 1906 to 1984. Aziz Cyril Ataya, 1898 to 1988. Guys, it's really not hard the way that they rewrote history. You want to know how it's done? So you've got John here. You got source book number 1. And you've got service, source book number 2, and then you just charge tuition for the rest. Because what do you do when you go to school? Well, I want you to take these 2 source books that we have, and I want you to write me a 10-page essay on the life of Coptic women. So, Friar Manasseh, he reads John in service, and then he writes his essay on women in Coptic Egypt. And then next semester, Iris Habib shows up into class. They give him the same 2 source books, and they say, I want you to write me a 10-page essay on the living quarters of the Coptics. And so, hey, he writes, and the whole class did it. It's just that these 2 happen to be the best 2 writers out of the class. And that's how the lie perpetuates. I've already covered in another video how in Spanish history, there was the 3 Andres that were basically responsible for, all of the Spanish history. And they were paid. One guy stayed at this palace for 20 years writing books. That's what he was paid to do. He was paid to rewrite history. So you only have to come up with a couple of source books, and then it just perpetuates itself, and people actually think they know what they're talking about. So they're enthusiastically selling the lie. I've got about a 300-page book here that I got on the Ottomans. And let me go to the back of it. It's got about 10 pages of bibliography. 1983, 1983, 1997, 1987, 1992, 1850. We got one guy from 1850. It's just on and on and on. There's 6 pages of this. And the oldest that is in there is from the 1800s. So you've got 2 guys here. And who knows, you might be able to find more, but this is just a great example of how the lie is sold and perpetuated. So we've got this big, huge history of Egypt, right? Here's Karnak Temple. Place is humongous. I mean, look at this little lady here and then the huge pillars, but just look at all the editing here. We think that censorship is bad on YouTube. It's just because we caught them doing it. The thing is they've been doing this censorship and lying for a couple hundred years now. They've had plenty of time to come in here and, hey, they learned what they needed to know. And then if they don't want it generally known to the public, you just get rid of it. But again, my question is, are those pillars really a couple thousand years old that have just been forgotten about and lost to the sands of time? Because this is Fort Craig in New Mexico, USA. Basically the same climate, the desert Southwest. It was decommissioned in 1885. I could not find one attack on the fort in any written accounts. It was just abandoned after the Civil War, and they didn't use it anymore. That's what, 140 years that's been sitting abandoned. This is 2,000 years that this has been sitting abandoned. So really the point I'm trying to make with that is just that we don't know. And I mean, honestly, with ancient Egypt, I still have some cognitive dissonance thinking that, hey, these guys might have still been around just a couple hundred years ago. But I don't know, maybe the pyramid builders did die out 2,000 years ago. But one thing I know for sure is the land wasn't empty for 1,000 years. Excuse me one second. And so just look at the dates here on all of our Egyptologists. We got one from 1763. I'll tell you right now that's one of the older dates you're going to find in this list. Just keep checking out those dates as I'm scrolling down. And now I'm going to speed it up a little bit because I'm just going to show, look, they're all from the 1800s, basically. A few dates they'll throw back to the 1770s. But evidently, until Napoleon showed up in Egypt, just nobody knew anything about it. The Coptics didn't keep any records for themselves. Nobody knew anything about the people prior to them. And then nowadays, who do we have? We have this D-bag, Zahi Hawass, the end-all be-all of anything and everything in Egyptology. If he poops rainbow sherbet in the Egypt world. If he says it's fact, then it's fact, and that is it. But, so, look, each one of these guys that you're seeing on your screen is just the lead of an expedition. So he had a small army under him or her, whoever's leading the expedition here, of hundreds, if not thousands of people. And just look at how many of these Egyptologists, grave robbers, history thieves there are. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But like I said at the beginning, we've all got an idea of what ancient Egypt was. We know all about it, right? Well, we know all about it from the last 200 years. Before that, evidently nobody knew anything about Egypt, including the people that lived there. And then, they find crazy things like the staircase in the middle of the desert just going, it's going somewhere. They won't tell us where. But, this guy, this is Disclosed TV. This might just be the site of the legendary Black Pyramid the Kemet had taken apart before the European archaeologists got there in the 1700s. Now, I haven't heard of the Black Pyramid, but I'm kind of curious now. But they're saying that it could have been taken apart in the 1700s. And like he says here, the Kemet, the Greeks called Egypt, Egypt. The people that lived in what we call Egypt never referred to Egypt as Egypt. It was Kemet or Mizraim or Mizrael. I can't remember exactly which one. Anyway, I'll leave this in the links because in this video right here, they go up to the top of the Sphinx and they look down this hole. There's a hatch up there, like a hatch in a ship. It's like a manhole cover that they open up, and there's a shaft going down into the head of the Great Sphinx. We've all heard of the Hall of Records being below there, but evidently there's a hatch on the head of the Sphinx. So we really don't know. And we get this BS story of cultural layers. This is why all of our history is buried, is because of cultural layers. This is 20 feet down if it's an inch. And it's hard enough that they drilled in here and anchored in to put a steel support in to keep it from collapsing on them. These guys are 20 feet down. These guys are 20 feet down below them. And just look at all these huge chunks and boulders everywhere. Now, when was the last time you went out to mow your yard and you had to go around and pick up all the cultural layer rocks the size of footballs before you could mow. Because we all know these cultural layer stones just appear out of nowhere. And if your house is 100 years old, then, you know, it's naturally about 2 feet buried by now, because that's just the way things are, right? And we certainly don't have anything that's going to explain why we find 12-foot sarcophagi buried out in the middle of the desert. Now, let me play you a little video here, which should have been queued up. Okay, I think it still is. So, just listen to what they're saying here. I mean, this is just how history works. It's a bunch of quote-unquote historians taking guesses.
The African peoples were very taken with the showy Eastern goods and quite indifferent to the yellow metal that was found in such abundance there.
They were just indifferent to gold, you know. The Phoenicians would show up to trade with them, and they'd trade all their goods for the gold, but evidently the Africans were too dumb to realize that, hey, they really want this gold, so it must be worth something, you know. That's really the history that they sell us.
This was the great bargain for the Phoenicians, leaving inexpensive pottery and jewelry and setting off again with gold. The ship would now head north. Excavations in England and Ireland have revealed that the Phoenicians reached even these far-off lands. Numerous finds.
Now, in a video I did a little while back, I even covered how Connie Claven Man, a bog man that was found in the peat bogs there, had a hair pomade that was of Mediterranean herbs. So they dated him at 300 BC and openly admit that they had a trade network going from Ireland to the Mediterranean in 300 BC, but then nobody knew about each other for 1,000 years.
Have indicated that in exchange for pottery and jewelry, the northern peoples gave tin, a metal that was in great demand for producing bronze and the other alloys used by the Phoenicians and Greeks. Ireland was the most northerly landing point for Phoenician voyages, and having traded their goods, the sailors could now make the return journey. The trips always held the portent of danger. In the storms of the North Atlantic, the brave commanders would safeguard their ships and cargoes by tying themselves to the bow so that they could see more clearly and avoid the cliffs. It was from there that they gave instructions to the crew. If they were lucky enough to make it through, they would head south to the Phoenician colony of Cadiz. Here the Phoenicians bought iron and paid for it with gold. Then they traveled on to Majorca, and from there to the rich colonies of Sardinia. It's here that an archaeological dig uncovered a gold mine, not a seam or stratum of gold, but a huge array of precious gold jewelry, now on display in the Archaeological Museum in Cagliari. Since Sardinia has never had gold deposits, the precious metal must have come from Africa.
And there the truth comes out. Since Sardinia doesn't have gold deposits, then the next logical conclusion is that it must have come from South Africa. They don't know. And here's the big problem that they're not pointing out is, did you see all that really nice gold jewelry found in an archaeological dig? Now, who just leaves this behind? Who just says, well, okay, I don't need this anymore? I mean, they'll probably say that it was a ceremonial burial. When it comes to archaeology, all people did was worship the gods. I mean, anything and everything was ceremonial or worship, or, I mean, they never lived anywhere. They didn't eat anywhere. They just worshiped all the time. But anyway, so they uncover all of this finished gold jewelry, a big hoard of it, with no explanation of why it's buried in the first place? Why are you pulling out all this pottery and gold jewelry? And here's a star for it here at Old Carthage, which was the main port of the Phoenicians. And then when you look at the ruins at Carthage, here's the old stonework base. And what is this up here? I mean, yeah, they dug some arches out of it, but this is dirt and rock. I mean, up here you can definitely see the big stones coming out of it. Brickwork with mud flood all over it. I mean, how else am I supposed to look at that? So let's get into some of the dates on everything, because I did come on here and I was the one that started going, hey, yo, look, everybody, we've got all of these earthquakes recorded from the 1812 era. So that is probably the most likely time for some catastrophes to happen. It was only recorded in America, though, and honestly, for me, I'm still kind of having a problem with that timeline because, you know, it seems like you got to go back to the 1600s in Europe for where a reset would have occurred. Now, where I'm at personally with things right now is if they were going to add in 1,000 years, it happened at this time, just after, I'm showing the Jesuit founding here, but you guys have probably heard this name, Joseph Scaliger, and the Scaligerian chronology. Scaliger was considered to be the foremost scholar in 16th century Europe, referred to as the light of the world, the sea of sciences, and similar epithets. And it was to him that we owe a modern definition of chronology. So it was Joseph Scaliger and the Jesuit Dionysius Petavius that basically said that all of our history happened in this order. And so whenever any digs come up, any evidence comes up, it's always the Jesuit schools that are the first ones in there to make sure that everything fits in the timeline. And we've got tenured professors with their whole careers built on BS information and can't upset the norm there. They've already dedicated that much time to it. That's the way it's got to be. If you find anything outside of that, then it's a blow to their ego. So they are going to do everything they can to suppress your new find. It's just the way of the world. But so it seems to me like the most likely time for the reset, if they were actually throwing in 1,000 years, it would have been here in the 1600s. And I've had my suspicion this whole time. Anybody that's been on my channel since the beginning knows how much I was questioning the long 18th century at the beginning of all this. And the more I get into it, I think I'm on to something here. I'll show you in a second. But this is the Gregorian calendar change. You know, this is all happening here at the same time in our history, according to the official chronology. And so it took the Holy Roman Empire from 1544 to 1583 to adopt the Gregorian calendar. It was a slow change in all of these places that took up to 100 years plus. And, you know, Russia being one of the last ones, it took from 1700 to 1918. So people weren't too excited about switching over to the Gregorian calendar. And we get the story that in England, people were rioting because of the time change. And they're saying that it was because they added 13 or jumped 13 days or something. And people felt like their lives were being stolen. They had stolen time from them. I think there's more to it than that. I'm just going to leave it right there. That's just my personal feelings on things. So also at this time was the Protestant Reformation, and there was a split in the Catholic Church, but somehow they just continued to get more and more powerful. And this was also the time of the French Renaissance, or the rebirth. That's a very well named time in history because it's immediately following the Middle Ages that seem to have not existed or are being completely covered up, one or the other. And then we had the rebirth of civilization and the history of civilization. And so the Renaissance also witnessed the discovery and exploration of new continents and the substitution of the Copernican for the Ptolemaic system of astronomy. Now, there's been the flat Earth debate going on for years on here, and that's what the Ptolemy system is, if anybody didn't know already. Ptolemy is the geocentric, and I'm just going to say, I'm not going to get into it on this video, but look, everybody keeps fighting about it. Everybody's slinging mud. Nobody can even have an adult conversation about it. But I can draw out some things that make a lot of sense either way, on a globe or on flat. If you understand how both of them work, it's a convincing argument either way. And as an indication of exactly how good the Ptolemy model is, modern planetariums are built using gears and motors that essentially reproduce the Ptolemaic model. When I was up at the planetarium in San Francisco, I even asked the guy at the projector, I said, is that really a Ptolemy model that is running this? And he said, yes, flat out. But it turns out that the whole flat Earth, round Earth debate is a major, major clue to our history and understanding this timeline. I'm not going to go into it in this video. If anybody knows what I'm talking about and has it figured out, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I always enjoy hearing from the critical thinkers out there. So I've been going through these old books of the 1600s. I left off in the American Southwest for a reason. I stopped reading from that book from 1671 because I wanted to explore these books a little further. And I've seen other channels using them too. I think I know what's going on. And I'm going to have to do a video just on this, the reset, and the printing press, because this is the beginning of the narrative. I'm pretty sure these books are all addressed to the king and look all official, and there's a lot of them, and it looks to me like it's the dime westerns of the day, because these dime westerns came out like in the early 1900s. They were huge, and it was all about the shoot 'em ups and the poker games and the gunslingers and the whiskey drinking and all this. Look, we've all heard of the shootout at the OK Corral. When you actually look into the historical value of that, it was like 5 guys that had a shootout. Now, it was a vendetta between the two groups, just like the Hatfields and McCoys. The reason those stories are so famous is because they're so far outside of the norm. When you have a family or 2 different groups, in the case of the OK Corral, that are killing each other and causing a bunch of problems, it wasn't the norm. And that's why those stories grew into the huge legends they are. And then, now we've got the Hollywood idea that has just completely blown everything out of proportion. So, like I said, these are glorification stories painting a picture of the past, okay? And that's what I am starting to think that all of these type print books were. Before the printing press, books would have been much more valuable and would have been handwritten. And like the famous burning of the books in Nazi Germany, how many times has that happened? Because before this printing press, and even, I was just talking about Victor Hugo and how he kept making references to the printing press being the end of the world and how they wanted to burn the king's books. He was dropping hints that they were changing history and that everybody was upset about it. So, how do I know all this? Here we have the Apis Sieve Osiris, the Bull of Osiris, in 1621. Let's go to some official history. The Apis cult continued until the rise of Christianity in the 4th century. The rise of Christianity gave rise to the Coptic language. The Coptic language was really only around for a few years, evidently, and disappeared. Anyway, the eternal bull, who symbolized Egyptian values, was incompatible with the new Christian vision, and the rituals surrounding the bull declined. The Serapeum of Ptolemy I was destroyed by zealous Christians circa 385 CE in their efforts to eradicate pre-Christian beliefs in Alexandria. In the 5th century CE, the Apis cult was banned along with other pagan sects and rituals as the Christian understanding of the universe and divinity became dominant. So by the 5th century AD, rise of the Coptic language, Christianity in Egypt, 1621, this guy goes down for a visit and he's putting the Bull of Osiris on his book. This is 200 years before all of these Egyptologists. Now let's read a little bit about what this book says. Starting right here, most of the inhabitants of Cairo consist of merchants and artificers, yet the merchants frequent no foreign marts. All of a trade keep their shops in one place, which they shut about the hour of 5, and solace themselves for the rest of the day, cooks excepted, who keep theirs open till late in the evening. For few but such have great families, dress meat in their houses, which the men do buy ready dressed. The women too fine-fingered do meddle with housewifery, who ride abroad upon pleasure of easygoing asses, and tie their husbands to the benevolence that is due, which if neglected, they will complain to the magistrate and procure a divorcement. So the wives here have a pretty luxurious life, it sounds like, and in the evening they hop on their donkeys and go for nice little evening strolls, and if their husband treats them bad, then they divorce his ass, as they should. But does that sound anything like the Sharia law Islamic background of Egypt that we're told, of this whole area, the Ottoman Empire? All this yellow area was Ottoman Empire from the time of the Crusades all the way up until about the 1800s. Yeah. So I got to looking into the maps of the era, which are, this is 1609. We're going to start here, and then we're going to go back to some older ones. Right next to the pyramids, and like I said, they knew all about Egypt. They knew where the pyramids were at this time. They know where all of these cities are, and look at the names of these cities. Aphrodites, just like the Greek god Aphrodites. Bacchus, it's spelled differently, but sounds a lot like Bacchus. Ptolemy Statio. Now, Ptolemy was back around, I think, 300 AD. Don't quote me on that. Look it up for yourselves. Anyway, Ptolemy Statio, which Statio means place where in the Roman Rite a devotion to the Stations of the Cross is celebrated. It's a Christian thing. And, I do have the date. Claudius Ptolemy, Greco-Roman mathematician, astrologer, and geographer, AD 100 to 170. But in 1609, we still have Ptolemy Statio here. When you go down here, here's Hermopolis, way away from the Nile. Modern day Hermopolis is right here, right in the Nile Valley. And Babylon, Egypt. Now, I did find the fortress of Babylon, but it actually showed it way up here in the Delta. There's really not a good explanation of why they are showing Babylon right here. And Babylon right here. And by the way, what we call Cairo, right next to the pyramids, the city of Cairo, evidently they were calling Memphis back in the day. That's showing Memphis right there at the mouth of the Nile into the Delta. And this is Memphis. So let me expand this and show you what else is going on with this map, because here we have Pithom and Migdol from Exodus. I'm sure quite a few people noticed that. So Migdol just means a tower in Hebrew. So that could have been one of any places. But Pithom, the Hebrew Bible sources exist for this city, but its exact location remains somewhat uncertain. Do they look uncertain about where these places are on this map? And I'm telling you, that's not it. Here's Mount Sinai. I mean, look, every one of the numbers here. I'll get to the pictures in a second. Here's Mount Sinai. You want to know where Mount Sinai is? You walk down the coast of the Gulf here and take a left and walk a couple days, and there's Mount Sinai. And then you go up here, you turn around. Look, it's the whole journey of the Exodus on the map. It's not like they're guessing about it. And then up here they have all the cool illustrations on it. Here's Moses being put into the river, and I don't know why there are so many babies floating down the river here. This is like the orphan train of the biblical days, I guess. I don't know what's up with that. And then here's Moses going in front of Pharaoh. But look at Pharaoh and his magicians. Does this look like the ancient Egyptians that we all have pictured in our head? I mean, I understand that I've been heavy Hollywoodized myself, but I hope everybody else realizes this, because this just doesn't look anything like what I've got in my head of the Egyptian Pharaoh. And this is where he threw he had Aaron cast down his staff and it turned into a snake. And then the magicians, they did it, and Aaron's snake ate the other snakes. But look at Moses back here. See those horns? Here's the Passover. Here's the angel of death outside. Here's crossing the Red Sea. Here's getting water from the rock. Look, again, Moses with horns. Big battle. Don't know which one. Moses with the 10 Commandments. I think this might be the manna. I don't know. But okay, so look, Moses with horns. Now, if you've never heard of this, I've seen it in art several times. During the Renaissance period, this is how Moses was depicted, as having horns. This site says that it's often said that, it's jamestabor.com. It is often said that this is a simple matter of mistranslation resulting from the fact that the Hebrew word for horn, kareen, happens to be also the Hebrew word for a ray of light. But St. Jerome, who made the translation called the Vulgate, which the Vulgate is the Bible that was adopted by the Catholic Church in the 16th century. At the end of Jerome wrote the Vulgate at the end of the 4th century, would not have made such a crude mistake. In fact, we know he was aware that Quran, the verb which he translated as had become horn, could also mean had become radiant, which makes this clear in his commentary of the book of Amos, written a few years later. This means that Jerome knew that the verse was understood as meaning Moses' face glowed and was rendered as such in nearly all the ancient Greek and Aramaic translations. Only one Greek translation available to Jerome, that by the Jewish convert Aquila, understood Quran to be had become horn, but nonetheless that this definition the Christian scholar chose to go with. Hence, Jerome must truly have believed that Moses came down from Mount Sinai with horns and not radiant. And so there are old poems of God and Moses, and God tells Moses he has chosen him to lead his people and that he has endowed him with superpowers, including fire-eating fire and a special purple robe possessed of virility. It's really interesting, the clothes thing, because if you've looked into the book of Jasher, it talks about the skins of Adam that Noah had hidden on the ark, and he gave them to Ham. Ham gave them to Cush. Cush gave them Nimrod, who was described as a mighty hunter who was rebellious against God, and the skins gave him extra power. So it's like there's some magical something to these outfits from God. I placed horns of majesty on your head so that if an angel comes near you, you will gore him with them. Now, the angels have always been jealous of man, or some have. We've all heard of the Nephilim, the fallen angels, the Watchers. Pick your poison on that. One of my thoughts on that, everybody will say it's because God gave man free will. Well, if the angels were able to rebel against God, then wouldn't they have free will? So I think why the angels were jealous of man is because God gave man godlike powers. We have the power to create and destroy in this physical realm. And so the jealous angels had to fall from heaven, from their plane of existence, from a different place. I don't think they can have contact with the physical realm. I think something, I'm not sure, it says that they came down and impregnated human women. I don't know how that happened, because I don't think angels are capable of coming into the physical realm, just like they say that Satan can't interfere directly. He can only deceive and cause you to go astray. Anyway, just some speculation there. But Moses taunts the angel, saying, I will not descend until I prove myself a hero, until I gore your bodies with my horns. So 1609, the whole Renaissance era, it seems like everybody was thinking of Moses with horns. Just thought I'd throw all that out there. I don't know what it means, but it's pretty damn interesting. Now, when we go back just a little bit further, from apparently 1575, now they're saying, blow that up to where you can see it. Let me translate this for you. Cairo, what once Babylon, Egypt, great city. Cairo, what once was the great city of Babylon. That's the way it looks like this was telling the story just before the French Renaissance maps. And down here we have the pyramids and the Sphinx, and they're all up on mesas. It's not a plateau like modern day. And down here, when I had a hard time with these translations. I do know that it says masa is Latin for mesa, just like it's drawn on a mesa. And then you've got Thraci Meretrix. Meretrix is whore. So the Thracian whore, and let me see if I can find. I'd love to just read it verbatim, but I couldn't figure out everything it said. So let's start at the top here, and it just says something, a single rock buried alive, pieces, which faces 10. Like I said, I was having a hard time with all that, but then it gets down to the Thracian whore from king in marriage tied after the death of this capital, and come at business Peter the Martyr something. So anybody wants to take a stab at their Latin there, good luck. Now there's a bridge. At first I was thinking this might have been an aqueduct, but when you translate that out, it is saying, where are we at? This bridge passes increasing Nile, whatever that means. But look, there's a door on the pyramid. There's a very obvious walkway leading to the bottom of the mesa, and now it's all plateau. So I don't know if this is more evidence of the mud flood. In my opinion, I'm saying yeah. But according to this map, in the 1500s, they knew all about the pyramids. They knew. And look, it even looks like a obelisk down here in the delta, or in the Nile basin anyway. And we've got pyramids stretching out quite a ways up north. So basically, the Egyptian dynasty disappeared. We don't really know anything about it, just like everywhere else in the world. And then all of a sudden in 1575, then they're saying, well, yeah, this was the ancient city of Babylon. And here's another map. That is 1578. And when you come down here to the notes at the bottom, right here, Cairo Vecchio della Antica, I'm guessing antique, Detto Babylonia. And number 25 is this little strip of houses here. So are they saying that this is the ancient city of Babylon? I don't know. The Tower of Babylon is the same. I believe it's the same word Migdal that I was covering just a minute ago. The Hebrew word, which means a tower. So I don't know what all it means. I did want to share that, but I do know that we've been lied to a lot. And look, here, the Sphinx has boobs. Now, I have seen pictures that I think were the Sphinx being dug out, but at this point in life, I'm not too sure anything. But when I take a closer look at the Sphinx, all these look like pretty new stones down here, to where all this is just completely falling apart. I could definitely argue that that's because this was buried. But when you look at the surrounding area, I don't know if I've got a picture of it pulled up. I mean, everything was buried. We have pictures just prior to the 1800s, when all of the Egyptology and everything that we know about Egypt has come to light, everything that has come to us in that time frame. But then we still have the pictures where everything is buried, and they were showing that the Sphinx was on top of a mesa, just like the Great Pyramids were on top of a mesa. And I want to see if I can find a picture of the surrounding area of the Sphinx, because when you look at what it was dug out from, I mean, it looks like hard compressed sandstone all around. Look at the background back here. I mean, this isn't just sand that's blown up here. I mean, this looks like hard packed, the same sandstone that I'd find down here at the beach. And it's obviously had a few remediations. I'm not even going to say remodels, but like I said, there's a trapdoor in the head of the Sphinx that leads down into here. And right here, you see this stone that is kind of pulled off to the side? Looks like somebody had been up in there. And all I know is they had a really long time to be Egyptologists and go out there and get their whole story straight and learn what they wanted to learn. And man, seriously, who did this? How did they do this? Look at these two stones. This is the actual entrance to the pyramid. Just look at the size of these things. So like I said at the beginning, the mud flood thing is a theory, but when you get to digging into things, and it's been just about any subject that I've come across, it would appear that all of our history is only a couple hundred years old. And that's where we get our whole story of everything throughout the ages. And it looks a lot to me like it goes straight up to the 4th and 5th century. You've got the fall of Rome, evidently the fall of Egypt too. And then the world just goes blank for 1,000 years. And then mankind gets smart all of a sudden, smart enough to read and write, to keep records, and to make the world that we live in. I mean, just look around you. Any asphalt road, any wood construction you see, this is all from the last 200 years. I mean, this world was nothing like what we see today 200 years ago. Nothing at all. So I'm going to end this one like I always do. I always end by saying we are all one. And I wanted to explain that a little bit, because I'm not promoting some communist agenda or anything like that. I mean, spiritually, metaphysically, however you want to say it, we are all one. We all are in this material world on a level playing field. And it seems like there is I'll just call it the Luciferian agenda of being in love with this world and the material things and power and greed and lust and, the 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins, if you really look at them, those could only come about from the material world. What are they? I think I even wrote them down. Sloth, greed, wrath, all these things. It's all from the material world. And we all come here, and for some reason, it's like we just have amnesia. We don't remember what was before this. And I'm sorry if, some people that are Christians and read the Bible think that I'm not going to say what other people think, but the impression that I got when I was younger was that you were nothing before this, and then all of a sudden my soul popped into existence in 1977. And I can't agree with that. Just like I can't agree that a dog has no soul or any animal doesn't have a soul. Anything that has a life force has that spark, has that little spark of divinity. And that's what I'm talking about when I say we are all one. This whole realm, this whole everything is all one big thing. I should have tried to figure out how to explain this better beforehand, but it's an inescapable one big thing. And so if you want to take the Bible as the end all be all of it, to me it just seems like there's parts of that that are missing, that's being withheld from us, is the way I look at it. But even then, in the beginning, God said, let there be light. What happened there? He said something. That vibration, it's the voice that gave rise to all material. It's like the voice, the vibration just ripped through space-time and started, as a result, spring forth all of this creation. But it doesn't matter how you look at it. We are all part of one thing, the good and the bad. There's balance to everything. There's the positive and the negative. And so while we're here stuck in this human form with no way out of here, and we're not sure how we got here, and we know that a lot of people are lying to us and trying to deceive us, I just think it's better to just, if nobody's done you any harm, just tell them, I love you, and you need to take care of yourselves out there, because we are all one. If that made any sense. Static out.